Welcome to RDA Plenary 21 and another Vocabulary Semantic Services Interest Group session. Thank you for being here, and a warm welcome to newcomers and oldcomers. Today we will be, I'm trying to see what I'm looking at. Yeah, so the housekeeping for today is to complete the attendee check-in if you can. If you have connected to the online session, there is a post for adding your name and details on the collaborative notes. A reminder that the session is being recorded, and there will be time for questions after each talk. So for the participants that are here, you can ask questions using the microphone. You will probably have to stand up to do that. And for the virtual participants, you can ask questions using the chat and starting with the @name of the presenter and following with your question. There is also a poll that we will be asking you to fill in, but I'm not going to do it now. And today we will have a short introduction of the group for 5 minutes. Then Barbara Magagna, that just arrived, will give us some updates from the iAdapt working group. Then Rebecca Koskela will talk to us about the metadata interest group. Arnaud Gingold will present a working group on multilingual vocabularies in the social sciences and humanities, the SSH. Later, Gerard Goldbeck will talk about semantics in the material science, the ontocommons and the data representation in chemistry and materials based on harmonized fair terminologies and ontologies. Jan, next to me, will talk about mappings for 5 minutes only. And then John will talk about recommending terms and ontologies and ontology resources you may know. Finally, we hope we have 10 minutes to run an interactive session that is about how should we work together with the different working groups, interest groups, and you all to deal with domain-specific semantics. So who we are. So the group has So the momentum for this group started off with the FAIR guiding principles, and especially the I2, which mandates that metadata and data are important to use vocabularies that follow the FAIR principles. So starting off with that, many task forces, groups, and projects started focusing on semantic interoperability, semantics, ontologies, vocabularies, and all of these terms, we call them semantic artifacts. So the VSIG, the Vocabulary Semantic Services Interest Group, was created in 2015. It currently has 4 co-chairs: John, that joined in 2015, Jan 2017, me 2020, and Julianne is a new chair that joined in 2022, and she will come. We have been running regular plenary sessions since RDA P14. Our vision is to harmonize our ways of working, focusing on semantic web technologies, and we want to do that through knowledge and expertise exchange across all domains. Currently, we have under our auspices a working group which is in a maintenance mode, which is the iAdapt group. Barbara will give you an update of what this group is up to. We also have 2 task groups, the minimum metadata task group and the terms and concept recommendations task group. And today, Arnold will talk to us about the multilingual vocabularies in the social sciences and humanities, that is a bird of feather, and Jan about the working group on mappings. In this session and in RDA 21, we are focusing on collaboration with other working groups and interest groups, with you all and with other projects where semantics are involved. And with that, Barbara, I'll give the floor to you.
And I click on the green button.
That's forward, yeah.
Good morning. I'm very honored to be able to talk about iAdopt. iAdopt, the working group, has already been working for years. As you can see here, we address the I of the FAIR principles by promoting the use of FAIR terminologies and also by providing a semantic broker between different FAIR terminologies for describing observable properties. We are a group with 4 co-chairs, all women. And it's me, Gwen is here, and we have Gwen Moncoffey from the BODC, NERC Vocabularies, Anusuria de Varayo, she is in Australia at the TURN organization, and Maria Stoika from the University of Colorado. But we have also other active, still other active core members. Sirko Schindler, he is also here. Alison Permant, hopefully she is listening. She is not here. But we have also other people that are here, like Ilaria. I'm very happy that you are here from LifeWatch. And we applied for a session here at the RDA, but since we already exist since 2019 or unofficially 2018, we are an old working group, and we have finalized the active period in 2021. In 2022, we have published the recommendations that have been also then endorsed by March 22. And our working group went through 6 tasks, starting from collecting user stories and formalize them in use cases, doing a quite extensive survey about observation-centric terminologies in 2020, drive use case requirements, and analyze these semantic representations and the vocabularies for then providing requirements for these observable property descriptions and developing the interoperability framework. We then started testing local mappings, mapping design patterns towards this framework. And yeah, and we are still active. So we have not been, we had not got the acceptance of the session because we are so old already, and we have already so many sessions presented the last 5 years, I don't know, it's a long period, but we organized a private session here. So if people are still interested, they can join us. I will talk about that at the end. So what are we about? We want to describe observations, but only the observable properties of the observations. So consider the upper sentence there as an observation: mean dissolved nitrate molar concentration per unit volume in river water at measurement site in micromole per liter per cadmium reduction method. So what is the observable property here? On the yellow part. We are not considering the measurement side. We are not considering the method, which are both very, very important information, metadata information about your results or your observation results. We are considering the yellow part, that's the observable property, also known as variable or parameter. And we are concerned how these are then represented. And we thought that it is necessary to decompose this description into different atomic parts. And then discussing about how to approach this, we found out that statistical measures and units are interesting, but not in the focus of iAdopt. So we reduced this to the central part without the unit and the process behind, and the upper part, so how we decompose, that's the iAdopt ontology and approach to use semantic artifacts or concepts from these semantic artifacts is absolutely open, freedom to operate. You can use whatever semantic artifact to address each of these atomic parts. So the endorsed recommendations say that your descriptions should be human and machine readable, and they should be as explicit as necessary to be able to understand what you have observed. We advocate to use semantic artifacts for the atomic parts, but also for the variable itself. We recommend to use the iAdopt ontology decomposition. And and more terminologies are adopting this iAdopt ontology to decompose their variable descriptions. This is the ontology. It mainly says that a variable needs to be described by at least a property and an object of interest. There can be others as well, like the matrix and the context objects. These are all entities that can be constrained. Here's an example. So you see that the variable itself is a concept. The label is not that important. I think a description, a human readable description should always be part of it. And you should then decompose it in a property, in an object of interest in this case, and a constant and a matrix. The property being the molar concentration. The entity being the nitrate, chemical substance. The constraint is about constraining the object of interest, in this case, the nitrate is dissolved nitrate, and the matrix is the precipitation in this case. And this can be then all of them decomposed, described with semantic concepts from semantic artifacts, as you can see at the bottom. We extended this, I'm finished in 1 minute. So the iAdopt ontology has been extended to describe also groups of these variables in variable sets. And here you see how we conceptualized it. This is an example from ELTA standard observations. We group standard observations using different variables that describe these observations. Yeah, and this are our outcomes. We have a catalog of terminologies, supplementary materials, the ontology, and the step-by-step guide. And actually, you see that there are different communities already are using it, and we are meeting tomorrow and start here at 70:30 at here in the ground floor to walk together to the university where we have reserved a room. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Barbara, and thank you for being on time. So we do have 3 minutes for questions, if you have any questions. I will start with one. Barbara, have you done any tests, proof of concept of interoperability between the different vocabularies? And if you have, what is the idea of a test that you would do?
Yeah, so to be able to do this, well, we can search around and see how this same variable has been decomposed in different semantic artifacts. I have seen these, yeah, and they use iAdopt, but interpret it also a little bit different. And we think this is still fine. But what we need to do is to do use these terminologies for data to be able to really see if they are interoperable. Our assumption is yes, but we have still to prove it. Yeah.
Okay, I guess this is maybe a next step to do a proof of concept of how iAdapt can bring semantic interoperability across.
We will talk about this tomorrow evening at our session.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, if nobody else has any more questions, we can go to the next speaker. I can't move anything. Yeah.
So, good morning. My name's Rebecca Koskela, and I'm one of the co-chairs of the Metadata Interest Group. So the Metadata Interest Group was actually one of the very first RDA interest groups going all the way back to 2013. And within RDA, sometimes the working groups that started out switched over to interest groups, but we started as an interest group, and what we've done is spawn off some working groups. The first of this was the Metadata Standards Directory Working Group, and we had discovered another co-chair early on was Jane Greenberg, and Jane and I had discovered that we actually weren't even going to do the working group because the UK had the Digital Curation Center, and it had a wonderful metadata standards directory online. But it turns out that those are really hard to keep up to date. So what this working group did is it provided a human readable way to update the metadata standards directory that was already online, to add metadata standards that weren't there, along with use cases and points to more documentation. So that group has completed. The next working group that we did was the Metadata Standards Catalog. And the difference between these two is this one is actually machine readable and human readable. And it is currently in maintenance mode, and I have the URL here. And if you go to the Metadata Interest Group webpage on the RDA site, you can find these links also. Alex Ball, one of the co-chairs, keeps this very much up to date, and he's actually been creating new versions of it. So this one is from a RDA terminology, it's in maintenance mode, but it's very active at the same time and being kept current. So the current focus of the Metadata Interest Group is the metadata element set. And why do we need a metadata element set? One of the reasons is that if you try to do all the different crosswalks and mappings from every metadata to other metadata standards, it's a lot of work. It's exponential, and you don't really want to do that. So the idea that we had was to start with an metadata element set, and you can include the syntax and the semantics of each element. The elements themselves are not just attributes. In fact, the work that we're doing right now that I'll show you on the next graph or page is trying to unpack those elements, because they're not just one thing. And you can also include how all the software that is included in a particular element set. And one of the reasons, especially for this group, is being able to understand the semantics of things. So my other co-chair, Keith Jeffrey, loves to use the bond example, where you can have chemical bonds, you can have economic bonds, you can have bonds in a human context of humans bonding, or his favorite, James Bond. So the idea is one word can mean lots of things. Mine's a little bit different. I use the litter example. So you can have litter on a forest floor. You can have a litter of kittens. You can have a litter you carry people on. But essentially, you need to be able to give the context of a particular element. And this should help out with that exponential, trying to map every metadata standard to every other one. So as I said, these are not single valued attributes. They have a structure as a syntax, and using the terms requires declared semantics. It's not meant to be exhaustive, and each domain, I think it's very hard. You can't come up with one set that covers all domains. So what we've done is we've both at RDA plenaries and at different workshops, we have worked with groups in other domains to see if this particular element set is appropriate, would work for what they would like it to use a metadata for. So the idea is to not only permit discovery, but also to give the context of a particular thing, and hopefully help the interoperability between things. So on our website, we have a URL for each of the elements, and I'm not going to go through each and every one of them. But if you go to these, you can see that there are Google pages for each one of the elements, and you can see the discussion that's been going on, and some have more discussion than others. When we first brought this out, one of the things that people looked through the set and went, I don't see title. These are not individual attributes. So if you go into description, that's where you're bound to see the title and other particular metadata attributes that you're used to seeing. So you have unique identifiers, the temporal coordinates, which would be the times, spatial coordinates. This is really interesting because people who deal with just projects or science on the Earth think of lat long, but we have worked with astronomers, and not only do you need lat long, you also need coordinates for that type of project also. You can have the different project attributes, things that go in there, including perhaps funding, so that organizations, funders who provide funding could look for acknowledgement of types of funding for their projects. And this is a continuation of that. I think on this one of the hardest ones is quality. And number one is, how do you define quality? So this is an opportunity. If you look at a lot of the discussion under quality is, I think within each domain, you're going to have a different way to define quality. And I'm not even sure within a domain that you can have consensus about how do you measure quality, but this is a place to put it, and it's a start. You want to include availability as far as license, persistence, how long it will be around. Citations is really interesting. We've worked with the different citation working groups to make sure that we've captured what they're working on. And related publications, both the peer-reviewed and the gray literature. And also really important is the related software, because often that is not included, and it's very important to understand what software is used with a particular element, or if this is an observation or a secondary element or data that was created by doing different analysis. We've included the schema and also the medium or the format also. So we've tried to cover as much, but some domains would require more than this. So I think we're trying to go for the minimal set, if there is such a thing. But yesterday we had our session, and I think the work between the metadata interest group and semantics vocabulary is very important. And it's really good to see that we're talking to each other, and people in the audience. Usually you see the same people in both things. So I really like the idea of working together. And that's it for me.
Thank you very much, Rebecca, for the important work that you are doing and for your presentation. There is time for questions. Yes, please. Yes.
So for questions, you have to go. to-
You have to go to the microphone.
Go ahead, Anita.
Yeah.
Thank you. Fabulous work, Anita de Waard, Elsbeer. Two questions, and of course, everybody who you show any schema to will say, well, what about this other schema? And I love your, and faculty like inability to map everything to everything. But if I'm looking at citations, publications, and software, I'm thinking, well, we as publishers are really moving towards the concept of research objects. That could be a paper, that could be a presentation, that could be a blog post, that could be a data set, that could be a software element. But that could also be a workflow or a protocol, right? These are all outcomes of research. And we've worked with Carol Goebel, who has the Workflow Forever project, and they have this idea of a research object manifesto, where essentially you wrap all the research objects together that belong to a specific piece of work. So long question, but have you thought about perhaps looking at it more from a research objects, collection of outputs way? And specifically, have you looked at the research objects container metadata system?
So the digital objects part is newer than this, but yes, we are. In fact, we had a talk about digital objects yesterday in our particular one. And I think both, you could roll all of this together and use the outer digital object. And then if you want to drill down into details, you could get to that. Objects are really, really, really big. So how do you figure out how? My question about digital objects is how are you going to find what you're looking for if you have this big outer thing? Does it include all the details you're going to need for discovery to start with? But yes, we are tracking that. And that's one of the things the metadata interest group, if you look at RDA, you'll see metadata all over the place. And so one of the things that we'd like to do is to try and track the things going on, and also to let people know what others are doing, so we're not reproducing or duplicating efforts, and we just make use of it. That's sort of a side thing. So I don't know how it's going to work out, but we're trying to work with them.
Can I make a comment on that? Actually, we have a meeting in January, or Carol will be, where we discuss this whole idea that a fair digital object, not just a digital object, could be very small. And research objects and research crates are just collections of fair digital objects. If they're completely composed of fair digital objects, they themselves become a fair digital object with its own unique identifier, and you can drill down very easily. So I don't think there's any discrepancy between IADOPT or whatever. As long as we compose larger digital objects out of fair digital objects, they become a fair digital object themselves, no matter how large they are. You have a graph of trillions of triples, which I consider a large fair digital object. So
Thank you.
I have just a quick comment. It's funny because I was starting to use research objects because I work for Pacific Northwest National Laboratory, and we're just now trying to create our research data process in our repository. I kept saying objects, and I'm located in the research computing section, and they're like, you can't use object. That means something different. And I'm like, oh my God, semantics again. But I still think of them as objects. I'm still trying to figure out what to call them so that they don't get confused.
It's like the parameter thing. Okay. If nobody has any more questions, we can move to the next talk from Arnold. You have to move your slides.
Yes, so hello everybody, and thank you for the group to host our proposal for our new working group in RDA. So first, it's this one. Green, yes. Okay, fine. It was easy. Thank you. So first, a summary about this working group. So it's about harmonizing and preserving diversity. It might seem a paradox, but then that is the situation we are facing in the SSH. So here, a short summary because the slides are a bit long. So here is the general idea of the presentation. So first, by harmonizing, we intend to harmonize the methods for SSH control vocabularies. So you will hear things that have already been discussed in the previous presentations, and I think it's good and precisely to have this one and right after. But here we are focusing on the SSH, the social sciences and humanities, which offer landscapes that is very diverse, and so are its vocabularies. And one important point that we notice in this landscape is the importance of multilingualism. I will come back to that later. And also there is the multiculturalism aspect. So in fact, another semantics question here to be addressed. And more generally, we see in this landscape of the SSH the need for quality control vocabularies that need to be compliant with FAIR. Another thing, maybe quickly, just to say quickly, important are the targets. So with this working group, we are targeting the researchers. That's obvious, the repositories, repository managers, but also the libraries and the publishers, meaning the publishers of, strictly speaking, publication. But I will come back to that just in the next slide. With a very quick self-introduction of myself, not to speak about myself, but to introduce a bit the context precisely. So myself, I'm a project officer focused on FAIR and data quality. I'm not an expert of control vocabulary. I'm here just coordinating, let's say, the proposed working group. And I work for OPRA's research infrastructure, which is an S3 for open scholarly communication in the SSH. And OPRA has developed a platform, GoTriple, which precisely created controlled vocabulary that I will describe a bit more later. So this is the infrastructure for which I work, but I'm based at Open Edition, which is a French publishing infrastructure for the SSH, publishing journals, books, and also blogs and scientific events. And even there, we have homemade control vocabulary that comes from actually the publishing industry using the control vocabulary BISAC, which is maybe one specificity of the area, like I just said before. So now to go back to have a bit more general view on the working group. A quick overview of the SSH landscape, or focused on the control vocabulary question. So it is characterized by diversity, heterogeneity, and also I would say discrepancy. I'm not sure about the word, but you will understand the idea. So about the diversity, the SSH as such, they cover many different fields that are different by objects, methods, series also. And another important aspect, especially considering multilingualism that we mentioned before, in the SSH, sometimes English is used just for communication, for broad communication, but the research itself can be conducted in national languages. And in fact, the research in the SSH is very often intertwined with linguistic and cultural specificities. So this is about diversity. Now, if we focus a bit more on the vocabularies themselves, here we see more heterogeneity. So there are broad and established control vocabulary that could be used and that can be used in the SSH, but very often they are poorly known, in fact, poorly used also. And we observe that the control vocabularies, they're very often disciplinary focused, which is not bad as such, but of course it creates some heterogeneity that adds to the diversity of objects and methods that we mentioned before. And then there is also what I call discrepancy, that is many control vocabularies, they are related to specific projects. And in these cases, very often they have limited interoperability and uneven technical quality. So this is something that we could connect with the need for fair, compliant vocabularies. So with all this, I think you understand already a bit more why not a working group specific to the SSH could be useful. So with these general objective to harmonize the methods and also the quality of the vocabularies, to improve the interoperability between the vocabularies in the SSH itself, but also with vocabularies in other fields. And just generally to increase dissemination and the impact of SSH research outputs. So it seems also obvious that the working group won't be able to address all these challenges, but we think that providing methods for multilingual vocabularies can support the inclusion of underrepresented languages. I will give the example of Triple about that just later. And the recommendations that the working group could produce will help small teams to minimize the cost of control vocabularies management. And yes, and the recommendations will increase the overall quality of the SSH vocabularies. And all this with a broader prospect to have federated resources for the whole community. So a quick overview of the background for this working group. So I mentioned before the GoTriple platform. So it's a platform built by Operas. It's a multilingual discovery platform for the SSH. I don't go into all the detail of the platform, which is a platform that harvests metadata from many endpoints for APMH, but mostly not only, and also with additional services. But one important thing here to mention are the automated semantic enrichments. So we have two levels of semantic enrichments. The first one is based on the MORES categories, MORES being a rather old, actually, European project for the SSH that have listed the main scientific areas in the SSH. So this is our first level of semantic enrichment, which we call classification. Then we have a second one called annotation, which is based on the triple vocabulary. So this is what I want to describe maybe a bit more in detail. So the GoTriple vocabulary contains more than 3,000 terms in the SSH and in 13 languages. It is initially based on the library of Congress subject headings. So here you see again the presence of the libraries. And from the SSH, which is obviously general and generic vocabulary, we extracted a subset specific to the SSH thanks to the Frascati taxonomy. And with the SSH, we already had some available mappings with some other libraries, vocabularies from France, Spain, also Italy, even if I don't mention it. And we have also mappings with Wikidata. But even this way, we didn't have a translation for all terms in all languages. So this is where we used this process of human-curated automated translations. That is, very simply, we used machine translation processes on the SSH terms. And then we had them reviewed by native speakers and reviewed and assessed, and in some cases corrected also. So this is how, in the end, we have the GoTriple vocabulary, which is available, as you can see, in the CC BY, and in SCOS and RDF, which allowed for more connection with other vocabularies. So this was the first example, the first element of background for the working group. Another one, which is rather close, comes from the SHOCK project. So the SHOCK project was about the social sciences and humanities open cloud. It gathered the ERICs in the SSH, which are listed here, and with the objective to have an integrated network of interconnected data infrastructures. It was a project that had the same time span of Triple, and in fact, we collaborated with them. So the main output of the project is the SHOCK marketplace, but I won't go into all the details of that. The more interesting for us are among others, the studies and tests that have been done regarding vocabularies in this project. And in fact, in SHOCK, you had a vocabulary initiative, and you have the link here if you want to see more details, which included works related here also to multilingualism. So I will just focus on one here, is the one that was related to the Clarin concept registry. So Clarin is an ERIC dedicated to linguistics, and it contains concepts for metadata and of linguistic resources. It is available in English. Should I accelerate or? Okay, because I can go quicker if you like. It's okay. No, so here, just about that, it's a similar example actually as the one from before from Triple, but slightly different. So you have this vocabulary that was available in English, and the translated translation in other languages was proposed. And here also, with another human-curated automated translation process, I would say probably a bit more accurate than the one in Triple. So first, they made a selection and comparison between 4 machine translation tools that are listed there. And the MT tools were applied to both concepts and definitions, which was, I think, an interesting thing to do, and anyway, necessary in the case of this vocabulary. And then a manual evaluation indicated the accuracy level of the machine translation outputs. So this was another example. Then there was another example, the ISCO occupational ontology use case, but besides in this case, the machine translation tool didn't prove completely satisfying. And I'm just mentioning it to have that in mind if you want to have a working group related to multilingualism, to have in mind that, yes, machine translation are not necessarily enough. And then the last element of background, which is actually the following of this work conducted in SHOC, is the transformation of the vocabulary initiative into the vocabulary commons. So the SHOC, which was a project before, has now become a cluster, the SSH open cluster. And in this context, have been established a charter for SSH vocabulary commons, and which are about the main steps to share practices and methods in creating, managing control vocabularies. And here you have questions about versioning, about verification, and another aspect like this, with again the final goal to have federated resources and services for the SSH. So all these elements of background, they now converge with the Opera's activities in the RDA Tiger project. So in fact, we have the proposed working group is related to a pilot that we lead in RDA Tiger, which is about the alignment of multilingual vocabularies in the SSH. So the pilot is led by Operas, but the group brings together Operas and SHOC partners, and with the objective to address the charter that I mentioned right before, first steps about the vocabulary commons. And for that, we get very useful support from RDA Tiger, namely from Ryan O'Connor and Najla Redberg. And we are looking for broader collaboration at this stage. And this is why I'm happy to have the possibility to present the proposed working group here. So, of course, we are looking for control vocabulary managers, but not only, also SSH researchers and maybe terminology experts, and non-European members would be also, of course, useful considering multilingualism, multiculturalism aspect. So now to close the presentation, about maybe a bit more details about the objectives of the working group. So first one is about sharing knowledge and use cases about multilingual vocabularies. So I mentioned 2 before, the one from Triple and from SHOC. I guess there are other examples. So any new input and insight on this topic will be welcome. And the next objective is to increase the SSH vocabularies coverage and usage precisely by improving their multilingualism and multiculturalism aspect. And then we have also the objective to improve the vocabularies interoperability and reusability through verification recommendation. And although it could seem a bit different than the first one regarding multilingualism, I think that precisely they're not that much, because precisely having fair vocabularies that are interoperable also facilitate precisely the connection between different languages and different culture vocabularies. And also the addition of new languages has impact on updating the vocabularies, and in that sense, they also imply some recommendation about versioning and connection between the vocabularies. So I will stop here. There are still prospects and open questions that are listed here because we had a webinar, I think 2 weeks ago now, where already some connections were mentioned by the audience. I guess more can be found. And this is where we stand. And if you're interested, you can check the draft case statement and join to discuss. And if you want to join, just contact me. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Arnaud. That's a very interesting, at least to me, presentation. If you don't, do you have any questions? Yes, please, John.
Thank you. That was, you just summarized an immense amount of challenging semantic work, it seems to me. And I'm really impressed by everything that you described having done. And so I think of it as already a very mature place that the work is in, the community is in. And I'm wondering whether you would classify the challenge as being more of a governance one, getting everybody to do the same thing, or a social one, educating everybody about the good ways of doing things, or a technical one where someone just needs to say, here's the right solution, I'm going to go put it together and solve 80% of these challenges just by virtue of adopting a good repository that takes care of a lot of these issues. Pick any one. Two.
No,
But not all
it's
three.
difficult to pick one. First, it's easy to put complicated things on slides, so it doesn't bring the solution. About the first, maybe the governance, I would put it maybe a bit after the others, considering that precisely there is not this shock cluster that is organizing, that have started to do its work. And there is a vocabulary commons here, so maybe here we have the beginning of a solution. So especially in the working group to focus the work on things that really need improvement, I would leave this one after. Then the social one is very important because it's not only about the technical aspect, it's also sometimes about the awareness, because sometimes in the SSH, when they precisely also in shock, some surveys were conducted where we saw that even the very notion of control vocabulary was not that well known, actually. So of course, in that sense, it's not that you can, it's not that the obstacles, it is only about verification, the verification of the vocabulary, but to know what it is just before starting the verification. And then the technical part, yes, I think it's also an important one, because we see that the processes are not harmonized in the community. And yes, clearly the FAIR principle here give, I think, interesting guidelines for everybody. That's my take on this, very modest.
I have a question. We from the EOSC Semantic Interoperability Task Force are making surveys about the use of different resources to make your digital objects interoperable. And we would like to ask you if you are interested to join this survey, or if you also can give us directions to whom we should go from the social science community, because it's a real cluster. And this is not only addressing vocabulary, it's also all platforms, repositories, etc. So it would be very nice if we could organize something like that.
Yeah, okay.
This week.
Yeah.
or at least try to get the right people.
Yes, okay. No, I take note of this. It's just I'm not the only one that can answer, because you have the Erics in shock, but yes, I'm sure. But some of them are already maybe in the EOSC interoperability, but if you mention it, I guess not.
No,
but
the survey starts now, right, and goes till end of the year.
Okay, give me any link information that you want, and I will communicate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
One more.
I'll be quick. This isn't so much of a question. It's just more just to reiterate what Arnaud said already. So this working group is being supported by the RDA Tiger project. So I just want to reiterate to people, this is very much in its initial stages. So we are looking for people to buy into the working group and to join, contribute to the case statement, and also if possible to nominate yourselves as co-chairs. Yeah, it's not so much of a question, but just the underlying. But and the draft case statement that this has been linked here, this has been totally Arnold's work so far, which has been absolutely hugely appreciated. But we need, at this stage, we do need buy-in from the rest of the community. So please be proactive on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Ryan.
Thank you. Can I just add one more thing? I was really interested on the vocabulary commons, controlled vocabulary commons that you
Yes.
had, which seems to me that is your social solution. So the solution for the social problem, which helps make the agreements, is the vocabulary commons. And then the working groups are the groups that will help you investigate the right solutions and then feed them to your commons to actually achieve semantic interoperability or interoperability in all levels. So I really like the idea of the commons being there and governing all your processes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Gerard.
Thank you. So good morning or good afternoon, wherever you are in the world. So I'm Gerhard Goldbeck. I'm from Cambridge in the UK, and I'm happy to also continue with the topic of RDA working groups that are in the making and supported by the Tiger program, which you can see here. This is now we're changing topic, however, and it was very interesting to see the previous presentation, and I'll also look at the case statement with a lot of interest because obviously there's overlap here in terms of the community that wants to improve and increase the adoption of what already is there and establish a common way of data representation. Here it says data representation in chemistry and materials based on harmonized fair terminologies and ontologies. We've sort of slightly changing the naming here in the meantime as well. It's mostly mostly about the material sciences, but there's a lot of overlap with obviously related sciences as well. The big green one. So it's got too many dots on it, but I know why. But yeah, okay. One of the backgrounds and drivers and for doing what we're doing is that in Europe there's been a very large project, well, large not in terms of funding, but large in terms of communities in the areas of materials and manufacturing called Onto Commons. So this is a project about ontology-based semantic interoperability, and the key things here in the Onto Commons project are shown here on this pyramid, that the interoperability is basically delivered through a pyramid of ontologies that sit underneath certain top-level ontologies. And then if you have interoperability basically mediated by that top-level ontology, this is one way of doing it, but then you have different top-level ontologies, so you need to have some sort of referencing or crossing at the top level, but also there was an introduction of what we call a bridge concept that goes between domain level ontologies at the domain level, even if they fall under different axiomatizations. This is done by a very rich annotation of different types of mappings and alignments that you can find. So it's really almost like a catalog of things that can say, okay, this is what is meant here or there, and also what are the sort of general terminologies and resources available for a term. Excuse me. So the other part is that there has been a focus on the top level ontologies, BFO, the EMO, the European multi-perspective material ontology, and the Dolce ontology, and also a top-level meta-ontology, which is really as far as possible an first-order logic level of integration of ontology. So this is very high-level work and probably very hard to use for a lot of people, right? Whereas the bridge concept gives you very specific ways of connecting already existing domain resources. So we have focused in our work a lot on the bridging here and establishing. And on the other thing that we've done is that's in a poster here that you can see. Look at all of the existing domain ontologies as far as they are available, accessible, right? So all of the basically fair ones. And these were about 50, and looked at, what is the coverage of the field in terms of terminologies, what terminologies exist. And basically the finding from that is that the coverage of the material science field in terms of terminologies and domain ontologies is actually not that great. There is another kind of indication is that there are no real sort of metadata that are of course people use metadata, but there are no established metadata. If you look at the linked open data cloud, you see all of these fields, and material is completely missing, doesn't even exist on there, right? So that's not really the state of affairs that we want to have. So we've got this sort of generic background work with, well, a bit more than generic. We've also done some bridge concepts for materials here, but we need to move it further into a really usable resource of metadata for materials. And this is also why we need this community, because obviously we want to say, okay, this is how you should do it with metadata in materials. But we need to adopt the standards that already exist in a practical way for the field, and also come up with at least hopefully some, I mean, there are developments now in some communities, in some geographies, in particular, for example, in Korea. I think the colleague Kwang-Rol Lee is also, I think, online, who are in a national project developing a set of metadata which they want to then use for all of their research in the material sciences. So this is obviously very important. There are many other communities that are doing that. So yeah, that's kind of summarized again here. So there's basically a lack of agreed conceptualization and terminologies. There's no equivalent to the IUPAC Goldbook for materials, definitely not. So even basic terms such as material versus a chemical substance is taxonomically not clear. And what happens is that people then, when they then put materials into systems, they say material is a chemical substance. But actually, a chemical substance is defined as something with a defined composition. Whereas, you could have a material where you have no idea what the composition is and you use it for something. I mean, the composition is one thing about a material. It's clear that from chemistry perspective, you usually start from, okay, you put this together and that together, then you have a substance, you know what it kind of is made of. With a material, that's not the case. I mean, this is just an example, yeah? And so it leads to bad practice by just using what is out there, right? Rather than thinking, okay, I really need my own, well, a definition for this. Yeah, I already mentioned the poor coverage of materials domains in existing ontologies, the inconsistent use of top-level ontology concepts when aligning key concepts such as material property. Again, same problem. There is no kind of mid-level ontology for materials that is accepted. So at the top level, you find things like quality and disposition. And then people think, oh, this material property is kind of a disposition of the material. This is like a quality of the material. And then you get sort of all sorts. And it's kind of, it doesn't really make it fair, definitely. Let's put it that. And then, of course, also in general, many semantic assets have a low FAIR score, so that's obviously something that needs to be addressed. And yeah, I just point to a poster, and that's also in a publication by EEE access that has now been accepted, which is good. So all of this has been funded by this European project that I mentioned there. Now, the next thing is, the conclusion is that the creation of a coherent and semantically annotated terminology for material science and related domains is very much needed to underpin FAIR data in common metadata schema and ontologies. So the new working group that we would like to start to, where we would like to address that is now called Harmonized Terminologies and Schemas for FAIR Data in Material Science and Related Domains. There's actually a link on there as well to the case statement. Not just to the case statement, actually there's already a link for the working group. The case statement is also there. That's supported by Ryan O'Connor and the Tiger scheme, which is really been extremely helpful for doing that. I mean, it really makes all the difference to actually, keep things moving. I mean, we've got people around the world, but the next meeting, setting up and getting things has been very good. The objectives of the working group are to collect and review existing terminologies and vocabularies and schemas for material science, and to propose and verify best practices for material science practitioners to achieve FAIR data based on terminology, schema, and ontologies, and to identify needs for harmonization of terminologies and schema in the material sciences, and then have some sort of demonstration of successful implementation. They're the co-chairs. Kwangro Lee, I think, is online. Zachary Trout is here. Masashi Ishii may be online, I'm not sure. Lee McEwen, I think, is around. And Isabel Lidge also is at this conference, at least. I'm not sure whether I see her here, but and the output, I mean, it says kind of needs trimming. We're kind of in the reality check of the 18 months. Which is really, really challenging at the same time, because we want to do lots of things, as everyone always wants to do, right? But what can we really do in terms of reviewing the recommendations? The third point, I would like to somehow at least achieve a little bit of that is to really start to make a proposal for at least a high-level material science schema, for example, in schema.org. I mean, there are these a few terms now in chemistry, and if we could at least agree in that working group, what we would recommend that to some material science terms metadata in that schema.org would be, I think, in itself a very good achievement. And then, have some instantiations of those. Obviously, there are a number of resources from the fair sharing and so on, welfare, etc. Also, in the Onto Commons has a portal, and so to really also instantiate, obviously, what we are doing using these types of resources, rather than obviously not creating anything new. There's already very good resources that we can utilize for that. And I think that's it. I'm looking forward to your questions.
It's time for questions. Yes, you have to stand up.
Well, we
yeah.
Let's bring her one. She's trapped. She got there.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your talk. I'm Lynn Pouchard from Brookhaven National Lab in the US. So I was wondering, do you actually incorporate things like Nexus into your ontologies? I mean, it might not be appropriate because it's really more a data format, but I was just wondering if there's space for that, because a lot of the people who are doing materials at my lab with all the light source and things like that, they use it a lot. And there's also somewhere there are PIDs for instruments that are available, and so I was just wondering if this is something you were looking at.
I didn't catch the first one.
I didn't.
So the first one is about Nexus.
Yes, the Nexus scheme. Yeah, absolutely. yeah, I apologize for not mentioning Nexus specifically in there, but it would definitely fall within, within the schema or ontologies and so on development, which is quite strong to integrate in that. Yeah. Because, but then we would probably because it's I would consider it as kind of a lighthouse. I mean, one of the more well-developed areas where we could actually learn from. But there are many others that are wasteland, let's say.
I'm in Lübeck, University of Vienna. On your penultimate slide, you were talking about chemistry and related domains. How can you define related domains? Because I'm in a working group actually for metadata in predicted structures, and I can see that there is a lot of struggle between different stakeholders. For example, materials in pharma and materials in materials chemistry, and they would like to keep different ontologies because of the historical reasons. Can you go with that?
I know. I mean, it's a challenge, but we started basically with saying, okay, materials and chemistry, but also on commons with materials and manufacturing, and of course we want to at least not be completely incompatible with things like okay, material versus chemical substance, for example. I mean, rather we'd like to take that on as much as possible. Same with manufacturing. They typically say, okay, this is the raw material for my product. I mean, that's kind of all they need. But at least, we have to be aware of that and at least interface with that as much as possible. But I appreciate that this is potentially difficult. But if you can, I mean, at least we want to see what the landscape is, what are the sort of the boundary interactions, right? And if you have any of those that you work with, then please let us know. And thank you.
Thank you for your presentation. I just would like to know more about bridge concepts, just because for me it's not clear how to manage this kind of concept. Do you choose them from one vocabulary, existing vocabularies, or do you define it before and trying to find them between vocabularies? And if you have two bridge concepts in two perimeters, how do you manage the concurrencies between the two bridge concepts? Can you tell me more about that?
So the idea, of course, is bridging between existing use of the term in different ontologies, in different domain level ontologies. And so you start by listing all of the different types of definitions and resources that there are and the uses that there are. And of course, you kind of then try and establish, some sort of common denominator, and then also you then say, okay, this is, well, either aligned with, or you can say SCOS, whatever, narrower than, whatever, between the different types of that term in the different ontologies that you go through. So it's like quite a long list of doing that for each of the different ontologies with respect to the way you have defined it. So it's like a bit of a crosswalk in a template. Yeah.
Continuing on this, so are these bridge concepts already published?
Yes.
And isn't that something? Has that something to do with the fair mappings concept? Or
yes. I will just discuss it also in the Birds of a Feather session, okay, on the mappings very briefly. So I didn't put it on that specific thing here because this is just one of the things that we're doing in the working group, but happy to discuss actually, that also at the poster if you like.
My question is another one. You talked about up-ontologies. I see there Dolce, I see the Buffo, but UFO is also one important one. If you have considered that, because I considered all of them when we were discussing about I adopt is a little bit of up ontology independent
Yeah.
because we saw that qualities cannot always be tackled in the same way as up ontologies do. So I love very much the bridge idea, and the I adopt is addressing any of the properties, qualities that are go across domains, and I would like to explore how we can collaborate.
Yeah, sure. I mean, in the top level ontologies in the OntoCommons project were the ones. I mean, Buffer, Dolce, and Emma were basically focused on because there's a limit to what you can do, and they are the most used ones in materials and manufacturing. That was kind of the result of some elaboration there, but there is also the mid-level bridge concepts that are published as part of the OntoCommons, and I can give you the links to that.
Yeah, I think I can see the point of collaboration between the two of you, which is point, if I understand it correctly, your point 3 of the potential output of this working group is proposal for a high-level material science schema. So what do you want to express with that schema?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely, I mean, this is a definite overlap because, I mean, for example, I mean, because it's about the activities, right? You do, I mean, so of course, you know, measurement activities, properties, how you do that is core part of that.
Yeah, it's,
I mean,
it's exactly,
sure.
yeah, what they did to express commonly how a scientist describes an observable property. That's what the iAdapt group did.
Yeah.
So you are trying to express something similar, but so you can learn, maybe have this lessons learned from their side.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, there are other, you know, for example, just to give you an example, there is has been one a SEN workshop on materials characterization, and there's like metadata for and the workflows for these. Even we've also, including my company, we're working in a project, another project on the Cameo ontology for materials characterization, which includes all of the a number of these things. There are, of course, I mean, you said you don't go into that so much, but there's a VIM, right, which does overlap in the end also, you know, the metrology people which are actually this month finalizing their update for the next version of that. And so, yeah, I mean, this is exactly the challenge. So as soon as you go into, let's say, one area, materials measurements, right, and properties, yeah, I mean, you know, I like what you said previously, the speaker. It's easy to put these things on slides, yeah. But then to agree, but yeah. Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you. No, I don't want to.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Sorry, Gerard, for chasing you, but it was very interesting presentation. And I mean, what's nice with this presentation is we realized that how important is that we start working together, because we're all working in the same area. And if we are not being careful, we're just going to make silos, and that would be a shame, because there's a lot of experience that can be shared across the groups coming from domains or coming from higher level vocabularies. And one of the things that I'm going to talk very quickly, so because I just have 5 minutes and I already lost 2, so I'm dead. It's about mappings, but yesterday we had but yeah, so yesterday we had a very nice side attack on session on mappings where I introduced the work that we did in Fair Impact. So I'm just going to make a very short summary. The presentations are going to be online and you can show them. If you have any questions on what's happening, you can always get me here at RDA. I'm here until Wednesday after the RDA Bird of a Feather session. So basically, what I presented yesterday is the work that we're doing in Fair Impact. and in particular on mappings, because one of the objectives of the task is to actually look at these mappings, which are related to how you relate historical ontologies on chemistry, for instance, and how you make sure you can interlink them so that you can use them and integrate different information systems. And in order to do that, you need to have these mappings made fair, right? They need to be findable, they need to be accessible, interoperable, and reusable. So that's the objective of the task that we have in Fair Impact. One of the objectives is to establish guidelines on how to make them fair, looking at the technical aspects and recommendations. We would like to work on a machine actionable common exchange form model, because we understand that some communities already have things that work for them, and we don't want to change it, but we want to find a way to actually be able to inter-exchange the mappings in a more common language. Then we also want to engage with the communities to actually co-create this model and these guidelines, because, well, as I was mentioning yesterday, I'm not a mapping genius. I'm not the only one knowing everything about mappings. I think we need to work together. Otherwise, I'm just going to make stupid recommendations that are going to be useless for everyone. And also one thing that we need to think about, that's the same for semantic artifacts, which, by the way, is kind of a bridge concept between all these different definitions of what is an ontology, a thesaurus, a controlled vocabulary, is to establish a governance framework, right? Because once they're being built, that's great, but then they need to be maintained, they need to be curated, how should it be sustained over time, and so on and so forth. So in terms of work, we are working on two sides. One side is the technical aspects and looking at recommendations. And the other side is looking at practical aspects on how you do mappings and working with the communities to identify their practices, what is their process when they work with mappings, to understand this process and then try to see if we can identify commonalities so that we can actually create a recipe that other communities that haven't started to map their ontologies could actually use. So now I'm just doing some advertising, it's just marketing. We have a series of 3 workshops on the community mapping practices that are coming. The first workshop will be on November 14th from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. And again, I apologize for our US friends and even Australians. This isn't practical for you. Next time, we'll make sure that we'll shift the time so that we can also have you on board. The objective is to gather inputs from the community. So we'll have community presentations and then discussions to actually sort of clean up a little bit the area and see if we can find the commonalities between the practices. You get the QR code if you want to register. We can go on the Fair Impact website. In terms of the technical things, we already had the first workshop that was actually quite successful. You can find the link to the material, so it's all accessible. So if you want to actually watch the full workshop, it's on YouTube. And there is also a short report we published on Zenodo. Based on this workshop and some other discussions we had in different contexts, we started working on these recommendations. And I'm not going to describe them. I'm just listing them for you to actually see. Again, it's really preliminary work. And yesterday was really nice because I actually asked questions, what would be your recommendations? And I got tons of answers. So now I need to actually go through all these answers and update these recommendations. But mapping is actually very important for many, many different communities. We identified that, for instance, the metadata interest group came up with some mappings. The scientific knowledge graph working group is currently building mappings. They need some mappings in the material science. So one of the ideas we had was to organize a bird of a feather, which will happen tomorrow morning at 11:30, from 11:30 to 1, which is a fora for talking about mappings, right? And one of the intention here is to say, okay, we do have a lot of groups in RDA and outside of RDA working on mappings, that there is a need. Let's build a working group so that we make sure that we don't build silos again, and we collaborate within RDA and outside of RDA context. So you are all welcome to join tomorrow morning at 11:30, and thank you for your attention.
To say something. I'm not there tomorrow because I speak, so sorry. But that's why I want to say 2 things now. we are horrible as humans in making synonyms, you know that. So I already heard 5 or 6 synonyms during this meeting for what I would consider a semantic type. You know, so let's make definitions, and let's also work against finding all kinds of words for the same thing. That's one thing, because then we have to repair that later. And the other thing is that, as I said yesterday, what I've always felt as a very weak point of the semantic web is that the predicates, which you may call mappings, whatever you want, are not well defined as a concept in themselves. So subject, predicate, object triple is 3 GUPRIs, you know, and the GUPRI of the mapping or the predicate or the relation, whatever you want, is very well defined, because is the same as whatever that means to a machine, you know?
Yeah,
Nothing.
doesn't mean much. Yeah, like for a machine, broader than is that doesn't mean much either. So yeah, that's some things that we need to work. And actually, I agree with you. One of the things that I would like to get in that working group is a definition of a mapping. And also we want to work on a classification of different types of mappings, because when you talk to the different communities, you realize that mapping is definitively overloaded. Some people are talking about links between controlled vocabularies. Some people are talking about links between instances, other data to data transformation. So it's a bit nightmarish, because you think you talk about the same thing and you end up realizing, no, not really. Okay, so let's try to work on this definition. I agree. Thanks, Barrett.
John, sorry. You know, you have.
I can either expand to the
accelerate
next item, or I can contract and give you time on the next item, whatever you like. Start with a shout out to, I was at Jan's presentation yesterday. It was very, very good. And I'm sorry you didn't hear me say that, because I'm not going to say it again. Many of you who have attended these before have seen a similar headline as this, because I've been working on this for about 5 years now. And I always work on it for an hour or two before the next RDA workshop. And so the goal is to answer the question, how do I figure out which term to use? Or the question, how do I figure out which ontology to use? And I think everybody here has faced that question in one form or another. There's dozens of use cases that reflect that question. There are actually some solutions of varying degrees of greatness. The one I'm most familiar with is BioPortal, which actually has one of the more decent ontology recommenders I've found. The frustrating thing about getting that question is that the answer is always, well, it really depends. And there are many, many facets that you can evaluate to determine whether a term or an ontology is good for you. So I wanted to just capture what those different facets were and make it in the form of a bit of a white paper that I could keep expanding, and maybe it becomes more of a Wikipedia page or something else. But I've been offering the opportunity for people to collaborate with me on this, and I've actually had 3 collaborators sign up, and one of them sitting there. Thank you, Julianne. And so we're starting to think together, okay, what would we like to turn this document into? And the goal, as it indicates, is to really have a reasonably comprehensive list of metrics and indicators of how you might measure the value of a term. So we are at the stage of beginning to talk to each other and comment on what's already there. In the process of my reading those comments, I had about 3 or 4 aha moments where I realized there's whole swaths of things that are missing or that need to be changed. And so we'll have a conversation here in the next few weeks about how to assess the document and triage the important parts of it. And the point is, if you're interested in engaging with this document, you are welcome to. Anyone can go on it and either comment on it or make changes to it. And so that would be welcome. You just have to put your name at the top. The bit.ly is there. And that's everything I need to say. So back over to you if you are ready, unless I don't think there are any questions. No questions. Okay, over to you.
Actually, there is one question from Maggie. I'll just say it and I'll put it in the notes so that if we don't have time, you can answer this question on the collaborative notes. And the question is to all speakers. All the work described today is very interesting and shows the topic is vibrant and essential. but I'm really concerned that the fabric floor people, the researchers, do not always understand why they need these fair semantic artifacts, B, how to actually leverage the available artifacts, and C, how to disambiguate between definitions that may look very similar but aren't. How do you experts suggest to involve actual researchers, non-experts in your initiatives? I'll put that question in the notes and you can answer there. And there is a small poll that we wanted you to, so a vote, you can vote on this one. So if you click on the next slide, there is a link, click on the poll. Not you. I mean, yeah. Let's see if that's
opening in another window.
It
so
will
it's
open
not-
in another window. So
We're giving some technical challenge to the.
yeah, that's great.
great.
So, but let me see how does it show where to go.
So we open.
It's open, but it doesn't show where to go for the Slido.
Yeah, you have to click on the link that's in your presence copy of the slides. Uh-oh.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
So
Click on the link and then we give the number. People will go to slido.com. We just need the number of their session.
yeah. Okay. Yeah, definitely. So
So if you want to contribute, you just go to slido.com, slido.com. And I'll give you the number.
brilliant.
Thank you. It's nice to get that kind of.
I guess it's something like 4266. Can you click on the URL here and the number will show up after polls, I'm hoping.
Present.
42666611 something?
Presents. And so the number is 1094-607.
1094.
So 1094-607 on slido.com, and you should see the,
You put a hash in front.
I don't think you need the hash. actually.
1094607.
The hash in front. So slido.com
Yeah, the hash.
hash and then 1094607. Hope it works. Hash 1094 607.
4, 6, 7.
One.
And can you on the back
Yeah.
enter into
Just
the
start
URL
your
slido.com /
You have to go,
pound.
you need to move on.
And we could do a show of hands in person
You need
for
to
those who
move on.
can't stand slido.com.
Started. It's on the phone.
Okay, yeah.
Sorry,
Okay.
sorry.
Yeah.
Yes,
the
Slido
rest of the
Slido is
URL.
way more stupid than it's supposed to be.
Pound.
Okay, close it.
Hash 10, say again,
So
With-
hash
hashtag in front,
1094607.
right, with a crosshatch in front of it, hash sign in front of
Yeah, you might not need a hash actually, but it's just because we didn't start with
Oh,
the
okay.
Slido.
it. Okay, sorry,
So you should see it now.
so close.
Should be working.
Enter the code again, where it says enter code 1094607. If you put the
Yeah,
code-
right, you've got it
Yeah.
right there. Oh, yeah, well, thank you.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
1094607. 94607.
1094 1094
1094 607. Thank you. Sorry for that.
Pretty good.
That's not the right one.
It doesn't matter now. What?
Yeah, but it's because you're seeing the poll questions. So if you go to the.
Yeah,
Yeah, but for some reason we don't have control.
we don't have
And so
control on that. The control is there.
They're showing up.
Eh? Yeah,
Yeah, we need to, they need to, well, I don't know what's happening, you know. Yesterday I managed to.
did you manage to do a poll yesterday?
Yeah, but I actually ran the whole thing on my Google Drive presentation, so it was on my laptop, not theirs. Yeah, otherwise it would have been the same nightmare.
Yeah. Eh?
So we see a nice
We'll put
word
the
cloud.
yeah. We see the clouds,
see
but
the cloud.
yeah, but you can't.
You just
like, yeah.
can't.
Yeah. So it's there. So you keep putting it. But
So are things like
maybe you have to log in.
common governance rule.
Ah, yeah, brilliant.
You can connect it here.
Okay, so no, should be this one. Yeah.
Okay.
Or not.
Just displaying the phone.
Just
Buy my software.
Yeah, so should we do, we're doing this, should we just do 10:30?
It's not connected.
Sorry, we're getting there.
a little bit broken. This would be for the sound. I don't care about it. It would be.
This way.
So we're already at the end of the session. So I see people running to coffee, which is totally understandable. So yeah, so it was a great session, and I would like to thank all the speakers for the presentation they gave today. It was really interesting, again, to see that in different groups there are semantics involved, and now what we would like to do is really to engage with you to see how we can work together. That was supposed to be also be a part of a second Slido. So there are initiatives like we could organize or co-organize joint sessions during the next plenary where we talk about your problems in semantics, and we'll get the whole community around. So that's something that could be on table, or even organizing regular outside of plenary meetings where you can come and present your progress or start asking some of the key questions you may have for your working group. So that's the kind of interactions we were thinking. Now, unfortunately, we cannot do that in the context of that session, but we'll definitely stay in touch if that's okay for you. So I would like to thank you all for your participation for this great session, and well, enjoy the rest of RDA and enjoy coffee.